You may be wondering why I invited you to be seated for the reading of the gospel, though it was kind of self-evident that it was very long. And given how long this passage leaves you on your feet, I thought seated, you could better take in what this text offers us. It offers us incredibly rich dialogue. It vividly portrays the humanity of Christ and the woman at the well's humanity. And though this story is so very familiar to many of us, it remains fresh. And it's my experience that this particular text always has something unexpected to reveal. True to form, reading it again this past week, I was surprised by how wrong everything is in John's unique telling of this account. The story is only told in the Gospel of John. That's right, wrong. Jesus is in the wrong country. He's in Samaria, and Jews are supposed to hate Samaria and Samaritans and avoid the place entirely. Jesus is doing the wrong thing, none other than talking to and asking for a drink from the wrong person, a Samaritan, of the wrong sex, a woman. In Jesus' time, you simply didn't do this. The woman seems to have a multi-page marital rap sheet, though this point is debatable, and many scholars do debate that. And it is with her that Jesus has the most extended dialogue in the entire Gospel of John. Now that would seem wrong too, right? Wouldn't it? Everything about this encounter at the well is wrong. Now, it wouldn't have been all wrong if Jesus were there to condemn her or correct her, maybe. But he doesn't do this. Not at all. Instead, what he does is he makes her a disciple, and instead, her story and her person becomes a model missionary destination for generations of Christians to come. Because after leaving behind her water jugs at the well, she sets off and she witnesses to her encounter with the true Messiah. With the words, "Come and see," she even produces some of the first of the disciples' converts in John's Gospel. So maybe everything isn't wrong after all. Now, this is not the last time that God uses what seems to be all wrong for God's purposes. It continues to happen today. As many of you know, a couple of weeks ago, a group of about 7 of us went to El Salvador to observe the second round of the presidential elections in that country. And while there, we visited the tomb of Archbishop Romero, one of El Salvador's many martyrs of the faith. And today, I have with me the icon, which usually hangs in our quarter right over here, of Archbishop Romero. Tomorrow, we celebrate his life, which was tragically cut short 34 years ago by a military death squad bullet. Now, while today, Romero is hailed around the world for his commitment to peace and to justice and solidarity with the poor of El Salvador, when he became archbishop in 1977, many people were dismayed. Did you know this? Do you know this story? And thought that his appointment was all wrong. During our visit to El Salvador, we learned how the late 1970s were an incredibly turbulent time in that country. The confrontation between those who seek to change the injustices of the status quo and the elite of that country that were seeking to maintain them. This confrontation was growing more and more violent. Along with lay workers and union activists and guerrilla fighters, Catholic priests were being killed by the military. For a time, carrying a Bible made you suspect. As Desmond Tutu has said, the Bible had become dynamite, and the country was coming apart at the seams. And then Romero was made archbishop. At this time, Romero was seen as a defender of the status quo. He had risen through the church's ranks while far away in Rome and had few close relationships in El Salvador. But he did have one very close friend. Do we know who he is? Remember the name? Remember the name of Rutilio Grande, a priest who had been working in an impoverished rural town and then was killed by the military. In a famous radio broadcast right after the assassination of Rutilio, Romero asked, "So whose pastor am I? The pastor of the people that suffer or the pastor of the people that oppress?" Romero was forever changed, and he left behind his obedience to the status quo. From that point forward, his life belonged to the poor of El Salvador. And this transformed Romero is the Romero we love and know today. Now, when I think about the woman at the well, Archbishop Romero, and many other figures we could name, I want to know how God can enter into these all wrong situations and completely transform them for God's work. What's going on here? This is a big question. I want to know the answer. There's one tantalizing detail in today's reading. It's one word that points to one way God does this work. I know it was a long passage, but hopefully you'll recall that after her encounter with Jesus at the well, the Samaritan woman sets off to share the good news, right? Before setting off, and I'm curious if you caught this little detail. It took me a few times through to see it, but in verse 28, she leaves behind her water jugs. Now, these are the objects which brought her to the well in the first place, and as far as we know, she never comes back for them. Now, why? Why would the author of John mention this? To show how forgetful she is? I don't think so. You see, the meaning of the Greek verb that's in the underlying text of what we read today, aphiemi is the verb, and it's translated left, that one little word, is not about absent-minded forgetting or leaving something behind. There's a lot more going on in that word. It's about turning something over. It's about shedding, giving up, letting go. She is giving something up and not coming back for it. In the encounter at the well, Jesus revealed God's eternal gift. That's this living water that we drink once and never thirst again. We can also call this gift God's grace. The Samaritan woman no longer needed what would not hold this precious gift. The woman's clay jars couldn't hold what Christ was offering to her, so she gave them up. The status quo bishop Romero could not hold the Christ that he met in the shanty towns and the people of the shanty towns in El Salvador. So he shed that identity and left it standing there like the useless jugs at the well. And what about you and me? What about us? As you lean deeper and deeper into Lent, you will keep on encountering this thirsty, vulnerable Christ. This encounter happens every time we engage the Word, as we're doing right now, receive the sacraments, and are in relationship with one another and with the world. And when you encounter this Christ, don't be surprised if you start shedding all over the place. That's because much in our lives cannot hold the gift of grace that Christ is offering us at the well. You more than anyone else know what is wrong in your life. Maybe your heart is hard. We heard the psalmist talking about that. It could be fears and hurts and wounds, prejudices and anger you cling to and that clog you up and keep you from being a vessel that can hold what Christ is pouring in. Shedding, giving up, turning over all of these wrong things is a terrific Lenten discipline. Are you up for trying it? If you do, let me offer you a few words about what you might expect. For one, shedding may not be as hard as you think. You may not miss what you shed and let go of. Neither the woman at the well nor Romero returned to what they had left behind. And don't be surprised if great good can come about through you. This really isn't about our doing. It's about God, how God works. Time and time again, God is entering into all the wrong situations and completely transforming them for God's purposes. This continues to happen today, and it can happen right now in your life and in mine. Christ has poured a cup of living water for you. Take it and drink and be transformed. And this is the good news of Jesus Christ. Amen.